I'm Utkarsha, and today I'll be moderating the session on behalf of product people. So today's event's agenda will be something like I'll just briefly explain about product people, then we'll have the presentation, followed by a Q&A session and networking session at the end. So I'll just briefly explain about product people. So we are a product management consultancy and we help companies efficiently discover and deliver great products faster. And how we do this is through interim product management. We do all the hands-on and unglamorous work of a product manager on interim basis. And most of our contracts are for around 2 to 12 months. We can also make pretty decks, but we rather prefer to deliver outcomes. And our team is fully distributed with the main legal entity in Berlin. And apart from interim product management, we also have a community builder, and we invite product leaders to share their knowledge around product management. And we are now around 5.3K members in the community. And we are growing. So these are some of our clients that we have worked with or are currently working with. You might know some of them like Scout24, Zalando, and Freeletics or Tier. So another news from our side, if you are looking for any new opportunity, we are currently hiring for product manager and lead product manager role. So feel free to check out the link that's shared here, and we'd be happy to see your application. So today we are glad to welcome Sarjeel, product manager at Atlassian, and he'll be sharing with us knowledge about scaling product teams when going remote. So thank you, Sarjeel, for joining us, and we look forward to your presentation. I'll stop sharing the screen and hand over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Utkarsha, and thank you everybody for having me here. I'll just share my screen. So I'll share desktop too. You may see my screensaver. It's a very interesting screensaver. And I'll start the presentation. All right, then. So getting into it, let me just introduce myself. So hey guys, thank you everybody for joining in and coming to this talk. My name is Sarjeel Yusuf. I'm a product manager at Atlassian, working mainly on the Openness product. And my domain is basically enabling the DevOps capabilities for our customers here at Opsini, and basically allowing the breakdown of silos that you have in DevOps practicing teams through Opsini capabilities. And today I really wanted to talk to you guys about scaling product teams when going remote. And this is mainly because especially in the environment that we live in, with a global pandemic going on, the new normal now is remote, right? So I'm pretty sure if anybody's really been in a product team before, or even just in any form of engineering team, yes, this is an industry that can go remote, but just everybody working from home and using video conferencing to come into meetings isn't the most effective manner. And a lot of us have actually noticed a breakdown in communications and quality and collaboration, right? And I think this is best explained by a story of mine. So this is a story that happened to me, and I learned a very valuable lesson from it. I messed up really bad. We were working on a project a while back, and everything was done. We were in the implementation phase. The designs were ready. The product features were ready. We knew exactly what we were building, or at least we thought we knew exactly what we were building, right? Coming closer to the release of that project, the engineer sent in some some finished product for review from to go through a design review, and it was noted that, and nothing was caught. And then when it was being merged to production, so we're very close to release now. We've got marketing around, customer successes around us. We're very close to release, but on all of a sudden, as we're about to merge to production, we realized that some of the colors that are being used are not part of the official palette that we use in our product. And it turned out that what we had in the designs was a small little avatar of, of a user, right? And that in the design, that avatar was basically supposed to be populated from one of the integrations that we were building. However, due to some miscommunication, the engineer thought that that is the avatar that needs to be built. It's the static avatar, but in reality, it is supposed to be brought in from the integration that we were building, and that's why it was of a different color, right? And that kind of, resulted into this small problem resulted into a huge delay in us getting out our project. And it almost, and in terms of like, it almost turned into a blame game, let's say, between a small conflict, right? And this conflict was something that I, as a product manager within the triad, was not even aware of. And I messed up because, as this isn't the engineering fault, or this isn't a design fault. The designer did their job and they got that designs out, right? And the engineer, thinking from the engineer's perspective, did their job. As a product manager, right, I had failed to communicate most effectively what was exactly required. Yes, we did have, now one of the problems why this occurred, and now this is a very rare problem that happens, not like it happens every day, but one of the reasons why this had occurred was because the engineering team responsible for building this at some point had changed due to some, or some of the engineers had shifted. So the engineers building this were basically came into the implementation phase without prior knowledge of the discussion that happened before. Now, yes, we had meeting notes, we had recordings, we had discussions, all of that, and everything was recorded and organized. However, you can't always expect people to go through, thousands of words of meeting notes or, feature specs, and like not every document will be read. Much to the dismay of us product managers who like to write down everything, not everything is read. And this is where those communication gaps happen. And when you're working in a remote environment, this basically just gets exasperated. So working remote is difficult, right? And the way we can look at this is through Daniel H. Pink's book. In Daniel H. Pink's book, Drive, Pink writes about, the purpose, autonomy, and mastery model, right? PAM. So the effectiveness of a team can be measured, or depends upon whether the team understands the purpose. What is it that they're building? Whether that team is autonomous, right? Or if they're continuously dependent on other factors or other teams, that kind of reduces the team's effectiveness. And of course, mastery. Is the team the right team to build this thing out? And when you're going remote, due to lack of communication, that purpose can get lost. And if you have inter-team dependency, and if those teams are not in the same location, setting up meetings and trying to get everybody aligned can also be a huge hassle, right? In a recent report done by Atlassian, we noticed that a large percentage of meetings are simply useless, right? And it's actually a lot of time wasting just having continuous meetings. And especially when you're in a remote environment, the instinct is like, hey, let's just set up a Zoom meeting. And there are like 100 Zoom meetings that happen every day. But again, I feel that we should be all very honest over here, because how many of us have actually just turned off our camera and turned off our mic and like, no, this doesn't really relate to me. I don't need to do that. And then, go to their kitchen and prepare coffee. This happens a lot, right? And I must admit, I do that sometimes, right? So what is it that we can do to solve this as product managers? But first of all, why should we even care as product managers? Well, product management came out of the concept of product-led development, right? As a product manager, the projects that, the development and the success and the growth of the product that you're working on should be something that you are inherently caring about. It's, I like to describe it as, the product is the product manager's baby, right? And that is why it is our responsibility to facilitate. Yes, it's not only our responsibility, but it is, we are part of that responsible stakeholders for facilitating communication, for facilitating that shared goal, right? It is like when we come up with, when roadmaps are set and OKRs are set, how as product managers can we induce shared goals, ensure product success, and at the end of the day, we're all centered around customer satisfaction. After all, customer-centric companies are the companies that we see are most successful, right? So, uh, and this is very difficult as product managers because unlike engineering managers or design managers, we are not the boss of anybody. We have to lead without authority, right? So there are various practices that we can uptake to promote the result of effective teams, right? Especially when you're scaling the team. So we see that the PAM model kind of breaks down when you scale and when you go remote. So what exactly is it that we can do as PMs, understanding our responsibility as product managers? So the first thing that I feel is extremely crucial is to ensure that we set clear goals, right? Is we really need the OKRs are a concept that were first devised by Andrew Groove at IBM, and they're very well explained. And the story of OKRs is very well documented in John Doerr's book Measure What Matters. If anyone over here is unfamiliar with what OKRs are or what KPIs are, or I really do recommend go check out John Doerr's book. And even if you are familiar with it, just go read John Doerr's book. It's pretty amazing. The stories in it are pretty amazing of how the concept of OKR developed. But regardless, what OKRs allow us to do is they allow a communication medium, right? When you have clearly defined goals, we these goals are something that people can rally around. On top of that, what we should promote, or what we should go for, is you have a company-wide goal, but then trickle down those OKRs to each level of the product building hierarchy or product building group, to the point where you should, like, as a product manager, do allow yourself to set team OKRs and communicate them with engineering managers, and you have engineering managers and other stakeholders come in to set those team level OKRs, and allow those OKRs to trickle down with the help of, again, the engineering managers or other stakeholders to even individual levels. So for example, even developers have their own OKRs. And when setting these OKRs, if we can get all the OKRs aligned in a hierarchical manner back to the main OKR, that allows for a great shared, that is very effective in bolstering that shared goal and responsibility. And also when we start effectively measuring these OKRs, it provides that transparency, and teams know where they are, and individuals know exactly what the state of the product is, and how their impact, right? How their contribution impacts these OKRs and the product success. Being accountable for your impact allows you to become more motivated, right? Knowing exactly how you fit into this larger living product really does motivate engineers um, and other contributors into working towards that shared goal, right? And this should definitely be facilitated by a clear idea of what exactly we are building, right? So coming back to the story that I had presented earlier, like, yes, we want the avatar to be populated from the integration and not to be static, for example. Another thing I like to do is have incremental demos. And I believe that this is something that really reduces the need for constant alignment and meetings. And it's something that, especially upper levels of management and stakeholders really love, because what happens over here is that, so we exactly know what we're building, right? And this is, by the way, these are real screenshots. I just changed the name of the demo projects over here. You can see secret demo, a secret project. So basically what we have over here is, like, we know exactly what we're building, right? What I like to do is I like to break down, like, so for example, let's say we're building feature, this is project X, okay? And project X has capability 1, capability 2, capability 3, it should have an add button, it should have a remove button, it should allow you to authenticate, it should allow you to break it down into extremely granular, segments. Then then what we should do is, like, every set a cadence to for the team to come around and demo what has been done and what is remaining. So for example, we use a point system. So at the bottom left corner, you can see that this is an actual point system that I use. So like, for example, if this capability, if the add button works in production, great, 1.0 score. If it does not work, 0.0. And then if it works in the developer's account, 0.25 works in staging, like that, right? And at the end of the day, we have a score. And that score basically allows us to see where we are in that week or in that time frame. So for example, on the right side, you actually see this table, and this is actually a real table. So you can see that our first demo that we had was September 18th, and we scored 0.21. And it's okay, right? This isn't to see how fast we're going, but to see where we are and to see where the risks are so that we can raise red flags prior. So you can see that, in the beginning we had 0.21, and eventually by October 12th, 2020, we got a full 1.0 score. So that was pretty good. And sometimes this doesn't happen, right? We do have sessions where sometimes the score doesn't change or we score a 0, right? So these things do happen, and we have to acknowledge that and accept that. Now, another thing that I really like to do is I like to leverage the tools that are out there, right? We no longer live in the, in a caveman era where everything has to be done manually. There are a lot of mundane tasks that can be automated. For the need for teams or development teams to continuously keep track of issues, to continuously be replying to messages on Slack. As PMs, one of our duties should be to cut down the noise for development teams, right? And make the whole process of development, the whole development process, streamlined and directed towards teams focusing on the implementation and on the development, not on replying to other stakeholders. They are not, the product teams or development teams shouldn't be the ones, keeping communication lines alive. That is our role as PMs. We should be the ones facilitating that effective communication and effective issue tracking and, concerns, right? So for example, like what I like to do is that, as in Atlassian, we use the entire Atlassian suite. So we are building, one of the products that I'm building is it's a platform product, and our consumers are other Atlassian teams. And whenever the other Atlassian teams spot a bug or have a feature request, what we did was we built a Trello board where they go and they put in that feature request, right? Or if they spot a bug, then they go and they put a bug in that in the Trello board, and that automates a notification in our Slack. So at the bottom, you can actually see the image of 2 bugs that were reported, right? Of course, I have highlighted out the exact bugs not because of NDA, but because they were just embarrassing. But so we can see that there were these 2 bugs reported, and this is in the Slack channel of the development team. And then on top of that, this also automatically creates a Jira issue, right? And it takes it to our backlog. On top of that, because we don't want to meet every time, right? And there's some topics that you just can't complete in the daily, right? You just can't complete in the daily. So what happens is that we also use Trello boards to, and again, you can use any other tool, by the way. I'm just talking about the live case. You can use any other tool, and you can have it in. We use these tools to track major discussions, and then weekly we sync. We have one big meeting where we just talk about all of these major discussions, right? So, and another thing that I say is that we should really advocate, as a product manager. So sometimes we don't think about it, but we should really advocate for technical debt. And this is mainly because, as we continuously build features, the technical debt increases. As technical debt increases, dependencies upon with teams increase. That autonomy that we talked about in the beginning reduces. And as the autonomy reduces, what we see is, one, the team is not that effective, in their velocity decreases, but also over time we see an increased amount of bugs, and also our feature velocity reduces over time. So what we should push for is, working with the technical stakeholders in identifying what technical debt is important, and how best can we reduce this technical debt, right? And a happy engineering team is definitely a team that is developing better quality features much faster, right? So definitely advocate for technical debt. Right? And finally, the last thing I would like to say is, just, especially in this condition that we are in, and especially in this current state of of human history that we're in, there's a lot of there's a lot of stress of working at home. You have developers with or you have team members in the product team who have children at home, or who have loved ones who are sick. For example, a lot of the development teams for a lot of companies in Bangalore were recently hit hard by the COVID situation that we saw in Bangalore, right? And it's us as product managers, like, we always talk as PMs, we always talk about empathy, empathy of the customer, but we should also use this empathy for our, with the team members we work in, right? We, like, a lot of times working remote is hard, and this may have adverse effect on our roadmaps, and we should be able to facilitate this and foster this openness culture. And this is especially true because this is especially important because it also allows that blameless culture, right? And what a blameless culture promotes is that people can be open about issues or concerns that they have that may turn into major blockers for a project, that may derail a project, right? And as you scale up, this becomes extremely difficult to manage, because there's a lot of pressure, and it's not very easy to, give attention to the, exactly what is happening on a granular level, right? And if you don't have a blameless culture, people do not feel open enough because, especially the development team, they're on the front lines, or the marketing team, the customer facing team, these guys are on the front lines. Without that blameless culture, people do not feel open enough to raise red flags, right? And these red flags are very important to be raised earlier than sooner than later, right? So coming back to, like, so exactly, so we really should be considered unaware, right? And that is actually the last thing I had. So just to summarize, when considering purpose, mastery, and autonomy, we should really consider the way the remote culture has affected us and how scaling does affect us, right? And I hope some of the solutions that I presented here today you found useful. And yeah, I guess that's my time. Uh, so thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and open to any question that you may have.
Thank you so much, Sarjeel, for an insightful presentation. And everyone, you are now welcome to ask questions, either verbally or in the chat in the Zoom. And for those who are joining us on YouTube or Facebook, we'll transfer all your questions here. So yeah, feel free to ask the questions. Okay, before we have any questions, I have some questions from my side. So I just wanted to know that how your experience has been with product management, as you mentioned that you have switched from engineering background to product management. If you could briefly explain about your experience.
Right. So I often like to describe this experience as something that, when I went to product management, I often say that I jokingly say that I was thrown into the deep end of product management. And I was, when I came into product management, one of the first tasks, that time we were building our first DevOps enabling feature at Opsgenie, which is called the Incident Investigation Dashboard, the Incident Investigation View. And that was a major project, and I was responsible as a PM for that project. I was made responsible as a PM for that project, and this was one of the first projects I'd ever worked on. I was an engineer, and by the way, when I joined product management, I didn't really know what product managers do. I just thought that it's an easy job, and if I switch to it, I get a lot of time to mess around. But that wasn't the case at all. Like, I ended up working more as a PM than as an engineer. Uh, so it was a hard battle. Like, there were a lot of mistakes I made on the way, but the good thing was that I had a very supportive team and very supportive managers, and eventually I managed to learn a lot of things to to help and contribute to the incident investigation view getting over the finish line and getting released. Eventually, that feature became the feature flag, the flagship feature. Pardon me, the flagship feature of Opsgeni's DevOps endeavor and also Atlassian DevOps endeavors in the Team 2020 summit that Atlassian had. So it was a pretty happy moment for me and for the team. So yeah, so and that it was that help that I got from a lot of people, and that support that I got from a lot of people that then helped me go for other successful projects, and also a lot of failed projects. It's not like I only had like I messed up. For example, in the beginning, I told you I messed up really bad.
Yeah, thank you for answering this. So, I just wanted to know that since you had an engineering background, how helpful that was for you during product management, or yeah, if you felt that that had helped you during your initial days in product management, or if
Yeah,
there are, if you could share any frameworks that you felt were helpful for you, because you mentioned that it was quite challenging for you initially.
yeah. So actually, in the beginning, um, like yes, coming from an engineering background and especially the domain that in which I was operating in, that was pretty helpful for me because the domain itself was DevOps and monitoring and CI/CD, all of these deployment tools, VTS tools, integrations, all of these things that we were building were very technically oriented, right? And I did tap into a lot of my and we were basically building developer-centric tools. And I, being a developer, could understand the customer base that we were targeting. So that did help me directly over there. But also, in general, like I felt that it helped me understand the aspect from the technical side. So, a lot of people like to define product management as a intersection between marketing, design, and engineering. So I would say I'm more on the engineering side, and it helped me understand, the technical aspect of what we want to build, and it allowed me to make more realistic roadmaps. At least, personally, it allowed me to make more realistic. Like, yes, okay, it would require this time because it requires this integration with this service, or it requires this microservice. We can't leverage anything else. So that did help me, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a product manager without any technical expertise, because again, for technical expertise, you can always rely on your engineering manager. That's why one of the more effective uh, building methodologies is having a triad between with a designer, a lead engineer, or an engineering manager, and a product manager.
Okay, great. Yeah, so it did help you. So yeah, it was interesting to know about this. So we have a question on YouTube, so I'll just read it out to you. So the question is product management going to be restricted only to agile? And do you see it going to evolve in the near or far future? And if yes, then how do you see it evolving?
That's actually a very interesting question, because look, in reality, like, we need to understand that, yeah, like product management is always an evolving field, right? There are always new ways to, you know, ensure velocity increases and you maintain stability, and you also have a good quality product coming out. Now, whether it's tied with agile practices, that I can't say that that will always be the case, because nowadays we do see a lot, like, it's mostly tied with the entire development culture, right? How are we building products now as compared to how we were building products before, right? I can give you I can give you an example, right? Like, and again, this is a technical example, and I guess maybe this is because I've come from a technical background, but when your development team is building a monolith system. So for those who may not know, a monolith system is basically where all the code is just in one big chunk, right? Development teams become more interdependent upon each other. And when you want to release a project, or when you want to release a new feature, you really have to take into consideration what else is being released at that date, as more than when your development system is based on microservices or more fragmented and more decoupled, right? So that is one example that I've seen, right? Like what is the interdependency between, how's the interdependency between teams and what they're building affect the interdependency between product managers, right? Because when your teams are more interdependent and interlocked with each other, then as a product manager, you also end up interacting with other PMs, and how do you negotiate what is more important than something else? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much for explaining it in detail. I hope this answered the question. We have few more questions now on Zoom as well. So the next question is from Afisa. I don't know, maybe do you want to unmute and ask the question? Otherwise, I could also just. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, thank you first of all for the speech. It was really interesting so far. I just have a question because at the beginning you said you were working in the domain, so as in engineering. So maybe the question is more about the biggest challenge for a product manager or product owner in a software update domain, if you know it, I mean, based on your experience.
Sorry, just to clarify, are you asking my biggest challenge as I came from engineering, or the biggest challenge generally?
Which will be the biggest challenge, since you know both sides, I mean, from the engineering side and from the product management side,
All right.
for this specific product?
Right. I think the biggest challenge, at least for me, is that we shouldn't always go for the next shiny thing, right? This happens a lot, especially when you have an engineering background. Like, you know, you see something and you're like, oh my God, like this is an amazing piece of technology. That may be true. It may be a wonderful piece of technology, but is it something that is valuable for customers, right? And that is where you should really have a business acumen and a marketing side that comes into the picture, right? To really validate that what we are building has that, to really validate the value proposition that you may be proposing, right? I have worked in a company. I worked in a company that started off, and I won't mention the company name, but it started off it was a small company and started off for a very specific use case, right? And there were many competitors in that field, and there was a lot of hype in that domain. There was a lot of hype. Over time, we saw that yes, there's a lot of hype, but it's just hype. Nobody's actually buying it, because they don't want a tool only for that specific use case. They would rather prefer a tool that adheres to that specific use case and other things, right? So that was a very interesting, and the company that I worked in was kind of like the last company to pivot away from what it was doing. All our competitors had already pivoted away, and we were thinking to ourselves, oh my God, this is amazing. We will not have a competition. But then you have like bigger companies coming in, bigger enterprise companies. Amazon was one of them, by the way, that came in. They had that capability plus all the other things that they had. And, you know, that was like, okay, we can't compete with that. We also need to pivot and expand. Right? We really need to validate our customer value proposition here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question on Zoom and on YouTube as well. I'll just bunch those questions together as they are similar. So you mentioned about team building exercises. So if you could share some of the successful examples. And also another question that's there from YouTube from Chloe. If there are any tools or activities that you found helpful for building culture and camaraderie within a remote team.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the two team building exercises, they're actually, you know, as well, okay, now I'm going to cheat over here. I'm going to be cheating a bit. Like as Atlassian, right? One of the greatest things that we're focused on is, you know, unleashing potential in teams, right? And so as a company, we are, you know, we are selling our product that we're selling basically is how do we make teams more effective? And one of those things are retros that you do, like the different types of team exercises and different types of team retros that we go for, right? One of them is basically like I forget the names of all these retros. There's just so many. But one of the practices that we do is, and I'm sure a lot of members over here do that, is that you always have the good, the bad, and the ugly after every project. So you come back and you retrospect on what was the good aspects of this project, what was the bad aspects of the project, and what was the ugly parts, right? So the good things is something that we should continue. The bad things is something that we should definitely stop. And the ugly parts, we would say, is something that we should improve on. So for example, in the story that I said in the beginning, the really, in the ugly section, they were like, oh, there was this like lack of communication, which is true. There was a lack of communication. And then we improved upon it, right? So yeah, that's one of the team building, because it allows everybody to come in and voice their opinions. And when people get to voice their opinions, they feel more included and build that, that effectiveness and that, that camaraderie between teams.
Yeah, thank you so much for this answer. I hope it answered the question. And we have another question. How do you make sure company goals get properly trickled down to product groups or even individuals, especially as the company scales or goes remote?
Right now, this is actually a very complex. This is an answer that I can't. I feel that I won't be able to do justice to the answer within the short time frame that we have, but I'll try. And I do recommend for the longer bit of the answer, because this is a very complex practice. Do go and read, again, I'm advocating John Doerr's book over here. Please do go read it. But in short, it requires, like when setting companies or higher level OKR, right? It requires a combination of stakeholders. You can't just expect upper level managers or higher level managers to set the OKRs and then everybody will fall in line. So like, then like the, like mid-level managers will be like, okay, like that's the OKR that we should go for. Let's do it. Because what happens is that sometimes it doesn't make sense, right? But if you're not involved in that OKR setting process, it doesn't always make sense. But of course, as you scale, you can't get every member of the company, like a 5,000 size company, to set the high level OKR, right? But you should at least get a good amount of stakeholders from everywhere invested in that OKR, and then that gets trickled. So it's not only one layer. If we look at it in the most, and I hate to say this, right? I hate to look at companies or like in a hierarchy manner, but just for the sake of this example, like if we look at it in layers, a single layer cannot set an OKR session. I'm truly against that. You need to get you need to get people from all levels to come together and set the OKR. And if that can't happen because of scale, then at least get enough people from enough layers to set those OKRs. And then they will, because the people from, let's say, the lower layers will feel more invested, and then they will drive it down. And then when they drive it down, they'll also get people who they are responsible for to come up with them and set those OKRs, and then that will drive down lower, right? So, yeah. And of course, the OKR needs to be clear enough. It doesn't, you can get as many people to set an OKR. If it's not clear enough and the value isn't communicated well enough, there's no point in expecting these OKRs to trickle down.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering this. I see some raised hands here, and if you want to unmute and ask your questions verbally.
Sure. First, me, yeah, or someone else?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, first I wanted to thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask, as you mentioned, let's say one of the main responsibilities of the PM is to facilitate good communication, and this is exactly the thing that suffers the most when we go remotely. Yeah. And I was wondering, you mentioned some, some techniques and tools from the toolbox of the PM. Wanted to know if there is certain ways that you would recommend to change and to adapt those tools when going remotely, or for example, maybe you would say, yeah, I think we should do daily twice, or I think it doesn't make sense to do X because it can't work remotely, or maybe you have some things that you can share from your experience. How can you create this communication even though we work remotely, not in the same place?
Yeah, so yeah, you're absolutely right. And many people think that the solution to this is just having more meetings. But as I said in the beginning, more meetings doesn't is actually detrimental, right? You just waste a lot of time, and a lot of people who are not meant to be in those sessions end up being in those sessions, and their time is wasted, right? So one of the things that I found very useful was leveraging the project management tools that we are using. So again, in Atlassian, we use, of course, Atlassian tools. You may use whatever other tools that are out there that your team is comfortable with using, and do look into become power users of those tools. They are built for a reason, right? Those functionality was built for a reason, right? Be aware of the capabilities of the tools that you're using and use them. So like, I'll give you an example. Like in the beginning, right, when we were a small team, or we were, and we were all in one location physically. If I had an issue, if I had a problem that I wanted to discuss, I would walk over from my desk to the engineering desk, to where the engineering team I used to work with sat, and I would literally just lean over and I was like, hey guys, like I have this issue or I have this doubt. Can we just talk about it? And everybody would get up, and conveniently we used to have a whiteboard at the back of our table, and we would all just rally around that. We just gather around that, and like we would just start talking about it over there. We can't do that anymore, right? It's not that easy anymore. So one of the things that I said was that we now use Trello, and we put like any big item that I want to discuss now, I put it on the Trello board. So like we have like a week, like we have like slots of weeks. So this week we want to discuss this. Every Monday we meet, we have a team sync meeting, we meet, and we discuss those big items together as a team collectively, right? In one big session. It's usually a 1 hour session. Sometimes it goes up to 1.5 hours, depending on how much stuff we want to talk about. But that has been more effective for us. Initially, before, when we had just gone remote, so this was like, in the beginning of 2020, when we had just gone remote, what happened was that every time somebody wanted to discuss something, they would, set up an ad hoc Zoom session, right? And that meeting fatigue started catching on for us. And we were like, okay, you know what, guys, we can't keep on having meetings every day or every time somebody has a question. So either please do acknowledge if that question is limited to one person, use Slack more, or then we build this Trello board. We're like, okay, we will set a cadence that every week we will meet for a big session, right? For a big meeting. And that meant that also allowed us to keep our dailies specific to what the purpose of a daily is. So before, we were also having like very big dailies where everybody wanted to discuss everything, right? Because we couldn't meet every time. So our dailies used to become 1 hour, 2 hours, which is not the point of a daily, right? Or it's not the point of a stand-up. So that's one of the ways that we did.
Okay,
and again, I really felt that this was very effective, because this is something that, it allowed us, it brought transparency, it brought alignment, and it also allowed like other stakeholders, members from other teams or upper level managers no longer had to have meetings with me to understand where the project was or what the state of the project was. They could simply go and see this report. Oh, on October 6th, like 92% of this has been completed. That's great. Right? So that kind of reduced the amount of meetings, and it bolstered communication.
Yeah, thank you for the question and an interesting answer to it. I also see raised hand from Raghava. Do you want to ask a question? Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, Sarjeel, thanks a lot for the session, and it was really interesting. And my question was, it is just a general question to a product manager. I just wanted to know, as a product manager, when you start developing a product and as a team, when you go through the process of it, and down the line there might be pivoting which might happen due to various reasons. So how do you really identify from which part you have to rework after the pivot is done? Like, is there any specific criteria towards it, or how do you do it?
Right. Now, I honestly feel that there's no right answer to this. I've been in this situation, and I'm sure a lot of the PMs over here have been in the same exact situation that you just outlined. It all depends on what the impact of that pivot was, right? For example, was there a reorg? That's a major impact, right? Sometimes companies reorganize their structure. Was there a member who simply left? and he was the lead, or he was the most important guy, and that had an impact? Or was it just due to something like a pandemic? So it really does depend on what the impact of that was. It's very hard to gauge. Like also there has been a situation, and I'll tell you this, there was a story of mine. There was a situation where we were building something. That time I was an engineer. We were building something, and all of a sudden our CEO comes into the office and he's like, stop whatever you're building, we need to build this now. All right. The reason why and whatever reason that we need to build this, he said whatever. So that had a major impact on the success of our project, on what we were building as a team. But at the end of the day, you need to, that is most effective. Like that transition, that pivoting, and having successful pivoting happens only when, as a team, you can have trust amongst your team members, have trust in the decisions that are being made. To make sure that that trust exists is not something that you will do overnight. It's something that happens over a very long period of time. And one of those reasons is, have this blameless culture, have that empathy, connect with your team, connect with your development team more than other product managers. I always say that, and when situations like this arise, step up and make sure that you act as the buffer of the problems that occur, and never play the blame game, right? Like that, you maintain trust. And when you build this trust, whatever direction that unfortunately you have to change into, it becomes much easier, because the team, as a team, not only the team but also other stakeholders, then begin trusting either your decision, or you as a person start trusting the decisions of others, right? So it's all about teamwork over here and team play.
That answers. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question and for answering it, Sarjeel. Before I take up last question, I'll just want to read out a comment from an interesting profile, the creativist. They mentioned that, in my experience, more teams have failed at Agile than have succeeded. Agile is an utopian vision that often is difficult to execute when you are working with humans. I don't know if you have any comments on this, but it was an interesting one, so I just read it out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, you see, like, that's what I'm talking about. A lot of things are hype, right? Like, for example, I'll tell you, like, I was, I'm a serverless advocate. I'm also an AWS community builder for the serverless community. But I see a lot of people using serverless technologies just because there's a lot of hype in the engineering world about serverless. That's not true. That's not good, because what happens then is that they go ahead and they build this technology using serverless, whatever product that they want to build it. You build it using serverless, and then serverless doesn't fit their use case, right? And a lot of, like, serverless is very coupled with agile. Again, DevOps, the same thing. People think they understand what DevOps is, but if you don't understand what DevOps is, then you go ahead and you try to copy some other team, and it just fails for you. Same thing with agile. The agile and DevOps and serverless and anything is not a silver bullet. There's no such thing as a silver bullet in the tech industry, right? You really need to understand your team, the culture of your team, the culture of your company, the product that you're building, the culture of different individuals, how your team operates, and then accept what practices is good for you. There's no such thing as an agile tool or a DevOps tool, I don't even agree that there's something as a DevOps engineer. There's the agile methodology. It sets the goals of agile, right? You need to practice, you need to morph your culture specific to your team and your product towards that agile goals in that agile manifesto, right? The agile manifesto does not say use this tool or do this. It says this is what we should be aiming for. How you get there, that's up to you.
Yeah. I will add something here too about this failing. The company usually think that agile is just a mindset, and so they try to coach people in this direction. But it's actually not only for people; that's for management. So the structure of the company has to become agile at a certain point. but they just forget this part, right? Because they think maybe they're gonna lose the power or something. So it's like somehow when you start scaling, then the company has to become agile as well. And sometimes they don't do that. So that's why it's like conflict.
Yeah, that's actually a very great point.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was interesting to know. And we'll take the last question for today. So, Sarjeel, you mentioned about these team building exercises. So the question is, are those the team building exercises run by you or the Scrum Master?
Honestly, it can be run by anybody, I would say, right? In many situations that I've been in, many teams that I have been in, I haven't run these team exercises myself. It's usually the engineering manager who runs the team exercises. But again, it just depends on your company. By the way, I do recommend you checking out a lot of these team exercises have been described in some of, again, no, I'm not aiming for cheap marketing over here. But again, as I said, Atlassian really focus on how we can make teams more effective. So it has actually listed a lot of the frameworks and has also provided a lot of the resources that you may need to do these team exercises. I don't have the link to that specifically right now. What I can do is, you can go search it yourself, right? So team effectiveness Atlassian, whatever, Google, or you can always contact me and I can try to redirect you in the right direction. It's a very nice set of resources in terms of, I didn't include them here because I wanted to make this product agnostic, of course. I didn't want to market Atlassian in a presentation, right? So, but if anybody is interested, I can redirect you to the right place or you can search it up yourself.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. And yeah, we'll now stop streaming and continue with networking on Zoom. And for those who have joined us on YouTube or Facebook are welcome to join us on Zoom. So yeah, thank you so much, Sarjeel, for the presentation. It was really insightful. And to everyone who engaged in the questions. And yeah.
Yeah. I
We'll
would just
now
like to say,
continue.
like, I really like to connect to everybody who's over here, and like, do feel free to reach out to me either on Twitter. You have my Twitter handle over there, or on LinkedIn, or any other communication channel that you may find. Right. It's really nice. Thank you so much, product people, for having me, and it's really great, interacting with fellow PMs up here. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we have our these events every Tuesday. So you are welcome to join us on the next meetup events. And yeah, we'll share the links also on chat.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the stream now.